December 7, 1941. The Japanese strike Pearl Harbor with 353 aircraft. In under 2 hours, they sink or damage 21 ships of the US Pacific Fleet. 8 battleships are hit, 4 are sunk. 2,403 Americans are dead. The surface fleet that was supposed to dominate the Pacific War is burning in its own harbor. But there is one weapon the Japanese do not touch. Moored at a different pier, untouched by a single bomb, sit the submarines of the Pacific Fleet, 51 fleet boats and a handful of aging S-class relics from the last war. They are the only offensive weapon Chester Nimitz has left. Within hours of the attack, the order goes out: execute unrestricted submarine warfare against Japan. It is a stunning reversal. For 2 decades, international law has forbidden attacks on merchant shipping without warning. The United States has publicly condemned Germany for doing exactly this. Now, in a single signal, the entire doctrine is discarded. The logic is simple. Japan's empire stretches across 20 million square miles of open ocean. Every barrel of oil, every ton of rice, every replacement soldier must travel by ship. Cut the supply lines and the empire starves. The submarines of the Silent Service are the only force capable of reaching those lines. Chester Nimitz understands this. He has served as Chief of Staff to the Atlantic Submarine Force in the First World War. He knows what submarines can do, but knowing the strategy and executing it are 2 very different things. The men who volunteer for submarine duty know the odds. Every patrol means 60 to 75 days submerged in a steel tube, thousands of miles from friendly waters. The air is thick with diesel fumes, sweat, and the stale reek of unwashed bodies. Fresh water is rationed. Fresh food runs out within weeks, replaced by powdered eggs and weevil-infested flour. But the real danger is not discomfort. It is silence. A single depth charge that lands close enough can crack the pressure hull. The crew listens, counting the seconds between explosions, knowing that the next one could compress their submarine into a coffin at 300 feet. By the war's end, 52 American submarines will be lost. 3,506 men will not come home. It is a casualty rate of 22%, the highest of any branch of the United States military. In Tokyo, the Imperial Japanese Navy does not consider the American submarine a serious threat. Anti-submarine warfare is accorded a low priority. Only one officer on the entire Naval General Staff is primarily tasked with overseeing it. Japanese destroyer captains consider convoy escort duty dishonorable, beneath the dignity of a warship designed for fleet engagements. This overconfidence is not unfounded. In the first 18 months of the Pacific War, American submarines produced dismal results. Of 134 merchant ships sunk in all of 1942, the tonnage barely reaches 580,000. Japan builds new ships faster than America can sink them. The net loss to the Japanese merchant fleet is negligible. Something is deeply wrong. But the problem is not the submarines. It is the men commanding them. The United States Navy has spent 2 decades training its submarine captains for a war that does not exist. Peacetime doctrine emphasizes caution above all else. Approach submerged. Fire from maximum range. Avoid detection at all costs. Never risk the boat. It is textbook procedure, and it is losing the war. Patrol after patrol returns to Pearl Harbor with torpedoes still in the tubes. Captains report contacts they chose not to pursue. Ships they decided not to engage. Convoys they watched pass from a safe distance. The reports read like exercises, not combat. In the US Navy WWEII command structure, submarine captains hold extraordinary autonomy. Alone at sea for months, they answer to no one in the moment. A cautious captain can spend an entire patrol avoiding the enemy, and no one will know until the boat returns. Rear Admiral Charles Lockwood arrives at Pearl Harbor in February 1943 to take command of the Pacific Submarine Force. His predecessor, Admiral Robert English, has been killed in a plane crash. Lockwood inherits a force in crisis. He sees the patrol reports. He reads the after-action summaries. The numbers tell a devastating story. Too many captains are going to sea and coming back with nothing. Lockwood and his training officer, Captain John Babe Brown, begin a systematic review. They are looking for one thing: aggression. The verdict is brutal. Fully a third of the submarine force's commanding officers are relieved in the first 18 months of the war. Some are transferred to desk jobs, others are sent to training commands. The message is unambiguous. Cautious captains will not command boats in the Pacific. But the problem is not only leadership. The weapon itself is broken. The Mark 14 torpedo, standard issue for every fleet submarine, is defective. It runs an average of 11 feet deeper than set. Its magnetic exploder detonates prematurely, or not at all. Its contact exploder crushes on impact instead of firing. Captains who execute perfect approaches and fire textbook spreads watch their torpedoes pass harmlessly beneath targets, explode short, or simply fail to go off. When submarine captains report the failures, the Bureau of Ordnance blames poor maintenance and bad marksmanship. Lockwood is furious. At a wartime conference in Washington, he demands action. If the Bureau of Ordnance can't provide us with torpedoes that will hit and explode, he tells the assembled admirals, then for God's sake get the Bureau of Ships to design a boat hook with which we can rip the plates off the target's sides. It takes until September 1943, nearly 2 years into the war, before all the defects are corrected. The combination of cautious captains and defective torpedoes produces an unintended consequence. Japan's early victories against the American submarine force reinforce a fatal complacency. Japanese naval commanders conclude that American submarines are not a serious threat. They invest almost nothing in anti-submarine warfare. They develop no convoy system. They assign destroyers to escort duty only reluctantly, and the crews they send are poorly trained in sonar and depth charge tactics. It is a miscalculation that will cost them their empire. But the Americans do not know that yet. What Lockwood and Nimitz know is that they have the boats, they are fixing the torpedoes, and they have begun clearing out the dead wood. What they need now are killers. Lieutenant Commander Dudley Mush Morton is, by the Navy's standards, a failure. He has been relieved of command of the USS Dolphin after his division commander loses confidence in his ability to resolve the submarine's material problems. His career appears finished, but Captain Babe Brown sees something the Navy's evaluation system has missed. Morton is not cautious. He is not careful. He is aggressive, reckless, and utterly without fear. Brown gives Morton a second chance, assigning him as prospective commanding officer aboard the USS Wahoo. The Wahoo is also a failure. Under her previous captain, Marvin "Pinky" Kennedy, she has completed 2 war patrols with virtually nothing to show. Morale is so low that the executive officer, Lieutenant Dick O'Kane, is considering a transfer. The Wahoo was not making much of a record, O'Kane later says, and we knew it. Kennedy is relieved. Morton takes command. Everything changes. Before departing on his first patrol as captain, Morton gathers the crew. His words are not a motivational speech. They are a declaration. Wahoo is expendable. Our job is to sink enemy shipping. Every smoke trace on the horizon. Every contact on watch will be investigated. If it turns out to be the enemy, we will hunt him down and we will kill him. He gives every man a choice. Anyone who wants to stay behind has 30 minutes to notify the yeoman. No negative word will be said about anyone who remains. Not a single man requests a transfer. Morton's tactics are as unconventional as his leadership. He puts O'Kane on the periscope during submerged attacks and runs the plots himself, a complete reversal of standard procedure. He frees himself to think tactically, while his executive officer handles the immediate firing solution. It is a system built on absolute trust. On Wahoo's 3rd patrol, Morton's first in command, he takes the submarine into Wewak Harbour, a Japanese supply base on the coast of New Guinea. The crew has no charts. A motor machinist's mate produces a cheap school atlas board in Australia. Morton navigates by it. Inside Wewak, Morton finds a Japanese destroyer. He attacks. The destroyer turns and charges directly at the Wahoo, closing fast. What Morton does next enters submarine legend. Instead of diving deep and running, he fires torpedoes straight down the destroyer's throat, directly into the oncoming bow. It is a shot that contradicts every training manual in the submarine service. The destroyer explodes. Over the next weeks, Morton hunts convoys with the ferocity of a wolf among sheep. He attacks on the surface at night. He chases targets for hours, running down ships that think they have escaped. On Wahoo's fourth patrol, he sinks 9 ships in a single sweep through the Yellow Sea, the most productive patrol by any American submarine captain to that point in the war. The aggressive submarine captains Lockwood has been searching for are not just performing, they are transforming WW2 submarine warfare into something the enemy has never encountered. Morton's success produces something more valuable than tonnage. It produces protégés. Dick O'Kane, trained under Morton's system, receives his own command, the USS Tang. He takes everything Morton taught him and refines it. Night surface attacks, daylight surface cruising with extra lookouts, closing to point-blank range before firing. O'Kane develops an approach so aggressive that other submarine captains consider it suicidal. The results silence the skeptics. On 5 war patrols, O'Kane sinks 33 ships, 116,454 tons. It is the highest total for any single commanding officer in the American submarine service. He is not alone. Slade Cutter, another officer rescued from a failed first command by Babe Brown, becomes one of the top 3 submarine captains of the war. Red Ramage earns the Medal of Honor for a single night surface attack, so violent it seems impossible. The outcasts, the misfits, the men the peacetime Navy had overlooked or rejected, they are the ones sinking Japan's empire. By 1944, the transformation is complete. Aggressive captains command nearly every fleet boat. The Mark 14 torpedo finally works. Allied codebreakers have cracked Japan's merchant shipping codes, feeding coordinates directly to submarine captains on patrol. The result is annihilation. In 1942, American submarines sank 134 merchant ships, totaling 580,390 tons. In 1943, that number nearly triples to 335 ships and 1.5 million tons. In 1944, it explodes. 603 merchant ships, totaling 2.7 million tons, more than the first 25 months of the war combined. But it is not only merchant shipping. In 1944, submarines of the Silent Service sink the fleet carriers Shokaku and Taiho during the Battle of the Philippine Sea. They sink or disable 3 heavy cruisers at the start of the Battle of Leyte Gulf. They sink the battleship Kongo, the only Japanese battleship destroyed by a submarine in the entire war. They sink the carrier Shinano, the largest vessel ever sent to the bottom by a submarine torpedo. In Japan, the effects are catastrophic. The island nation that launched its war to secure oil, rubber and raw materials from Southeast Asia is now starved of all 3. Oil imports collapse from 28.5 million barrels expected in 1944 to just under 5 million delivered. The Japanese Navy cannot fuel its remaining warships. Its pilots cannot train. Its factories cannot produce. Bulk commodities reaching Japan fall from 19.4 million tons in 1942 to 16.4 million in 1943 to less than 10 million in 1944. By early 1945, foreign trade is virtually strangled. The merchant marine that carried the lifeblood of the empire has lost over 75% of its tonnage. The Japanese cabinet will later report to the National Diet that the greatest cause of defeat was the loss of shipping. Admiral Halsey is more specific. Asked after the war to rank the instruments that won the Pacific War, he lists them in order: submarines first, radar second, planes third, bulldozers fourth. The cost is staggering. 52 American submarines are lost in the Pacific. 3,506 officers and enlisted men are killed. It is a casualty rate of roughly 22%. 1 in 5 submariners who goes on patrol does not return. It is the highest loss rate of any American military branch in the war. Morton does not survive. In October 1943, the Wahoo is caught on the surface in the La Perouse Strait near the Japanese coast. Japanese aircraft destroy her. All 79 crew are killed. When the news reaches Pearl Harbor, Lockwood writes, "It just didn't seem possible that Morton and his fighting crew could be lost. I'd never have believed the Japs could be smart enough to get him." O'Kane survives, barely. On the Tang's 5th patrol, a torpedo malfunctions and circles back, striking the submarine. The Tang sinks. Of 87 men aboard, 78 die. O'Kane and 8 others are pulled from the water and spend the rest of the war in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. The final tally. United States submarines sink 1,314 enemy vessels in the Pacific. 54.6% of all Japanese ships lost in the war. They destroy 1 battleship, 8 aircraft carriers, 11 cruisers, 42 destroyers and 25 submarines. They sink over 5 million tons of merchant and naval shipping. They do this with less than 2% of the Navy's total personnel. Chester Nimitz, who ordered unrestricted warfare from the very first day, later says, during the dark early months of World War II, it was only the tiny American submarine force that held off the Japanese Empire and enabled our fleet to replace their losses and repair their wounds. The Silent Service remains the least publicized campaign of the Pacific War. The men who served in it were sworn to secrecy during the conflict. Many never spoke of it after. The aggressive, unconventional captains who shattered Japan's supply lines, the outcasts Lockwood and Nimitz chose over the establishment's favorites, proved that in unrestricted warfare, the rulebook is the first casualty. 52 submarines rest on the floor of the Pacific. 3,506 names are carved into memorials that most Americans have never visited. The numbers speak for themselves. Whether anyone is listening, that is another question entirely.